We are all about charity here at Sex and Space, and today's shout-out is epic. It's for an organisation called Decolonizing Contraception, a not-for-profit community interest company formed by Black and people of colour working in sexual and reproductive health, or SRH. They came together in 2018 to increase awareness about colonial influences on SRH. They are championing the idea that decolonisation is not just an academic idea, but a solution in helping address the huge health inequalities present in the sexual and reproductive health sector. They are volunteer-led and funded by donations. Check them out at www.decolonizingcontraception.com. They are Evie's charity of choice today.
Sex, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the speculative interdimensional vehicle, Sex in Space. Its mission, to explore new points of view, to seek out fresh opinions, to boldly go where so many have gone before, and still somehow manage to totally miss the point. Subscribe to Sex in Space, wherever quality podcasts are found.
Hello, I'm Tim.
And I am Jess.
And welcome to another episode of Sex in Space. This is our mega project, and it is exploring sex across all of its infinite dimensions.
Where we turn the awkward into the straightforward and try to have a little bit of fun doing it.
Yes, this is one of those episodes.
Yeah, talk about fun. Today we have with us an episode we recorded with Evie Fehilly, a sex educator, a clown, and a sex clown. So you can do the math on that. Drag king, queen, and all-round queer megastar. Fehilly creates taboo-busting theatre, but also puts sex education at the core of her work, both hosting the Sex Clown Cabaret in London and running workshops at feminist sex shop Shh. So we spoke to Evie, well, I spoke to Evie via Zoom, and we actually shared somewhat of a similar history. We'd both been to the same crazy clown school in Paris, and so we've got some of the same stories, but certainly nothing I've ever done has been as exciting as what Evie has to talk about. So yeah, I highly recommend you dive in, and I hope you enjoy.
Lice you lead, Jess.
I know.
And now, the interview.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me, Evie. I recognise
Thank you for having me.
It's a hideous time of day. You're at the arse end, and I'm at the I'm at the nap end. And so I'm really grateful that you've got out of bed to talk to me.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I've got so excited over the process of Googling you. And I know literally just before I was looking at an amazing picture of you, which I hadn't clocked before, but I think you're in a costume that's covered in pantyhose penises.
Yeah.
It's so great. And I literally was sitting on the couch by myself and laughed out loud when I figured out what it was. And I looked at that picture a number of times and been like, oh, cool, it's kind of a costume. And then when I figured it out, like, oh, this is so good. So I guess we need, like, that was your intro, but I guess we need that just raises so many flipping questions, doesn't it? I would love to know how you would describe your journey to what you're doing now, which sounds like both clown and sex education and some other stuff. Yeah, how's your life been for you, Evie?
Yeah, that's a big question. Yeah, it's been so really sort of the beginning of it is that I always wanted to perform. And like since I was tiny, I've wanted to be a performer and I've wanted to work in theatre and make theatre. So that took me to do lots of musical theatre and lots of Amdram for a very long time. It's awful Amdram. And lots of good Amdram as well. And I then went to Gaulier, where you've been as well. Went to the famous clown school near Paris, taught by...
Yes, weirdly,
yeah.
I can't believe that we've both been to the same clown school, although I was terrible at it, let me say, so it is great to talk to somebody who's stuck it out, because you were there for 2 years, weren't you?
Yeah, I think everyone is terrible at it. I think that's what he does to you. I think it was really interesting watching people, because were you there for a month or a bit longer?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to like watch, because he is, for anyone who doesn't know, like he is this. Have you talked a lot about him on the podcast before?
No, no. So
explaining?
absolutely, most people are going to go, "What? You can go to a school to be a clown? What do you practice with a tiny tricycle? Like, what is that?" So I would love to hear how you would describe what that thing is.
Yeah. So what is clown school? So clown school is somewhere. It's a theatre school. It's a theatre school, but it's more fun at parties to say clown school. That's what I'd say. And he is very famous for clown and for teaching clown, and he is a clown. His whole persona is being a clown. So there is definitely a focus on the more comedy stuff. But basically, my interpretation of it was that I spent 2 years with an old man with a drum going, "Okay, bang, 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 bang. Everybody, now you go on the stage and you be funny, yeah?" And then everyone goes up on the stage, and then he bangs his drum and he goes, "You are fucking awful, leave my stage." That was 2 years of my life.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot to endure. From personal experience, it was almost traumatizing, I would say, and it takes a lot to endure. So hats off to you to keep getting up and standing on the stage.
Yeah. Looking back on it, I'm like, oh my God, why on earth did I put up with an old man banging a drum at me?
Yeah.
No idea.
Yeah.
No idea. But I'm very grateful. It definitely gave me lots of things. But that's not to say that I wouldn't, I don't know, as an older, more feminist woman, I don't know if I could deal with it now. I think I would really struggle.
Yeah, there's definitely there's a whole conversation there for sure. But I guess most people aren't going to know the context of that. So I guess I'm kind of interested in, like, you studied clown, and then what did you think was going to happen after that?
I've gone on a real tangent.
No, it's great, but
yeah, but that is, I'm very, very, I always go on tangents, so keep me coming back. So then after Gaulier, I sort of struggled for a bit, sort of floated around, couldn't quite work out what I wanted to do, and couldn't work out a way in. I think Paris clown school is amazing, but it doesn't give you that sort of leg up in the city that you're in. I think it doesn't give you like a showcase or like a place to start. So that was a bit bamboozling. So I then got into kind of like the queer scene in London. There's this amazing venue, which is now I think it's the only venue in the UK that's like a listed protected building for queer history. So it's called the Royal Voxel Tavern. It's amazing, and it's just incredible, and it's this like incredible bar that has had drag queens in it, I think, for 50, 60 years plus, and it's just amazing. And this company called Ducky, they took on a load of young performers, and they trained us and helped us make solo work, and it was run by this wonderful performance artist called Ursula Martinez, who is just an incredible badass. And we all just became amazing friends, and it was just a really incredible experience, and it really brought me into the queer cabaret scene, which was just, it kind of saved my life in London. I was so lonely in London, I had no idea what I was doing, and then I suddenly had this like queer family. It was just amazing. And then that brought me kind of into, I just needed a money job at the time, and about the same time as working with Ducky, I desperately needed a money job and thought it'd be really fun to work at a sex shop, so applied for a job at Shush. My friend was working at Shush, so I just started there as a shop girl, and I just thought it would be a short-lived thing for a bit of money, but I just completely fell in love with it, and I completely fell in love with how amazing it is to have open conversations about sex, how to make sex feel mundane is just a completely empowering experience, completely connects you with your body again, and it enables you to explore in all these ways. And I had until that point had some like really horrible sexually traumatic experiences that just made me completely I almost described myself as asexual at that point. I don't think I ever truly was asexual, but I think at one point I was sort of so terrified of sex and so completely convinced that it wasn't for me, that I just couldn't find attraction to anyone and couldn't find any reason to do that. And it was working at Shush, and it was finding this way to have these conversations and kind of like go from 0 to 60 that that made me jump back into sex again and feel sexual again and feel sexy again and go back into relationships again and be interested in that side of things. So the combination, I think, of like being embraced by this really gorgeous queer community and then working at a sex shop was just this amazing coalition. Is that a word? Well, I'm going to use it. It's like coalescing. I think that's what I'm looking for. Coalescing, and it was exactly what I needed at the time to really sort of come into my own sexuality, and that was such a wholesome experience that everything I've done since, I sort of started to take over the sex education of Shush. Now I teach all the classes, and now I've become interested in like making that experience, so talking about sex in quite an immersive way. I want to give that to everyone because it was so incredibly helpful for me, and it kind of saved my life a little bit. I'm using that a little bit too much. It sounds very hyperbolic, but I believe that. And it certainly saved my relationship with sex. And I believe that so much in the world would be sorted if we sorted good sex education. And so now through my workshops that I do with Shush, but then I also run around London, a few up and down the country as well. And then also my cabaret work now, it all surrounds talking about sex in some way. So the act that I do the most is a parody of Louis C.K. And it's all about, and that is the penis costume. So I start completely dressed as Louis C.K. and I sort of start talking about, I just start lip syncing to him saying like about how important it is to apologize to his kids, and how like what just basically just like splice together bits of his stand-up. And then I then sing "sorry seems to be the hardest word" or bits of that, but then go between "I touch myself" and then go into like the hypocrisy and him like refusing to apologize. And I'm just quite fascinated by him because I feel like he's one of the perpetrators of the Me Too movement. Certainly not the only one, and not the most severe. I know lots of people love to pick me up on that one. Why are you doing Louis C.K. when you're not doing Harvey Weinstein? Well, trauma isn't relative. And he's just, I think the hypocrisy, I think because I really loved him as a comedian years and years ago, and he's so vocal about like being such a feminist, but like knowing he's a dirtbag but trying to be better kind of thing, and then refused to apologize. I got so interested in him. But my work revolves around sort of, as a drag king, taking those men down. And I sort of I've done a Kevin Spacey piece, which has had a bit of a less airtime as well, but sort of looking at these figures of the Me Too movement and tearing them down and creating like a fun, cathartic conversation around them, hopefully, because I still feel like, as serious as these things get, they still need to be funny and irreverent in order for it to be an interesting conversation. But yeah, that is now part of my practice as well. So it's kind of, I think I always thought the performing and the sex education was separate. And in the last year or so, I've been like, aha, they are the same thing. Yeah, and so now they're sort of becoming one thing. Just before lockdown, literally the day that the country got locked down, we were just about to start. Like, we had this Arts Council grant to start this show called Caterpillar Soup, which I was making, which was all about like the through thread of it is sort of more of a personal story about sexual trauma, and then there were lots of basically these massive, big, mad drag king cabaret pieces thrown into it. So it's sort of like a personal story, and then talking about the worldwide implications of the Me Too movement, and things like that, and sort of female bodies and how they're perceived and how they're controlled and that kind of thing, but in a mad drag cabaret way. And that was just about to start and is now put on hold, but it will happen at some point. Yeah, I feel like I've rambled on forever, but that's kind of my circuitous journey.
What an amazing, that's so beautiful that you've managed to find these two things that you care so deeply about, and that you've figured out that they can merge together. Sounds like an amazing business opportunity. I say that as you say that things have been cancelled, and I guess I did want to ask how COVID-19 has affected your practice. I mean, are you still able to continue doing sex education with, sorry, you say shush, that's how you say it.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's the people who own it, they say it's shush. So you'd think SHUSH, maybe.
Sorry, that's a horribly boring thing to ask you. But I guess what I am interested in is if what has been affected by this global crisis, and how has it changed how you can do what you do? The COVID has just massively affected everything, and that it's just an extraordinary thing, isn't it? Because I feel so guilty for sort of, I've been chatting to all these artists and all these people who are just sort of distraught, but then they say that they're distraught and then desperately like that. But I know, like, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a nurse, and they're sacrificing so much more than us. So there's this sort of like self-flagellating thing with it. But yeah, it's completely destroyed a lot of it. I had like there was this week in March where I had like 72 gigs in the diary that just one by one of them got cancelled, which was quite incredible. And then with the workshops, we are running them online. The shop, the thing with Shush is that we never competed online. We were never like, the big one in the UK is Love Honey. I don't know if they exist do they? So I'm like, I mean, Love Honey is set up to be an online Amazon. It's a sex toy Amazon, isn't it? Yeah, they're huge.
And what'd you say?
They're huge, yeah.
Yeah. So we're never going to compete with them, and our whole point was that we didn't really try. We had a in-person service, and it is a really incredible place. Like, I remember going in there sort of years before I worked there, when I was still sort of in the midst of feeling really messed up about sex, and someone just gave me a cup of tea and sat me down, and we sort of chatted for a while, and I cried a bit, and it was just so lovely, and it's such an important space. But its thing is the bricks and mortar shop, and you go there for this specialized tailored advice. So yeah, that the shop will really struggle. I don't quite know what's going to happen there. I imagine it will close, and I don't know if it will be able to open again, but I imagine they will find some way to keep it going online. At the moment, I'm working for them online still. I'm doing a few workshops a week, all on Zoom, or we're doing like Instagram live Q&As and stuff, which is really nice to kind of reconnect with it in some way. But it's so difficult. Like a bit like this, it's lovely to do these things online, but also so much harder than in person. You're like,
that is true, but I mean, I guess there's a small amount of us that's grateful, because we probably wouldn't have made it in person. I'm not.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. But it's and that there are definitely pros. I'm being a bit negative, but there are definitely, like, what's amazing about it is I had someone sign up to a workshop from Colombia the other day, and like that feels really exciting. so it feels like we're like maybe stepping on new territory, which is really lovely. But what I really miss is, you know how like, because we have like, I don't know, 25 people in a workshop, and when you get over about 5, you have to stop. Everyone mutes their thing because of the feedback. So it's just, I miss that. I think I'm a massive insecure extrovert, so I need that feedback of people like, aha, yeah, aha. So I really miss that. So it's just a lot of me kind of like on transmit, which I'm not such a fan of, but they're still happening, so I'm very grateful for that, and they're fun still. We're doing a big sex pub quiz this Wednesday.
Awesome. Those workshops, what are they? I mean, I guess like I've never been to a sex workshop before, so I mean, without giving away too many of your trade secrets, I guess. But what would happen if I was to turn up at one of your sex workshops, if they were in person? What is that like?
So it depends. We do quite a few different ones. Online we're doing a little bit less at the moment because it's trickier, but if this was in person, so the one we do the most is called Orgasmic, and it's all people who have vulvas, and we just talk a lot about pleasure and orgasms, and kind of a lot of it is just having 12 female-bodied people in a room and getting them to talk about their own pleasure and their own vulvas. And we talk a lot about toys, we talk a lot about ways of masturbating, and we talk a lot about just giving permission. I think there's still such a stigma around female masturbation, and I think there's such a guilt around it. I always think it's really interesting and really telling. Shush do a lot of work around vaginismus, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a condition that where people struggle or cannot be penetrated at all, and that doesn't always mean sex. That could be just being penetrated with fingers or a tampon or something else. And so we sell these things. In fact, I have one right here. We sell these things called Dilation Kits, which are, this is the smallest one, but they come in a set of 4, and they're little sort of silicone, very, very small silicone dildos about the size of a finger, and the idea is that you start with one and then you work your way up. And for someone with vaginismus, that can be quite a bit of a chore. It can be quite hard work. And so one of the things we do is we've made a little softer version, thinking about you and your designing stuff. This is, the original ones are like really, really hard and plasticky, and these are much softer. But also they come with a vibrator. And what I find really interesting about that is how often I have spoken to someone who needs a dilation kit, but then when I say, oh, and it comes with a vibrator, so it can be more enjoyable for you, they're like, oh no, I don't need that. I just want to do the chore. I don't want pleasure. And then that has happened so often. And this is obviously completely anecdotal, but just that's happened so often from working in the shop that I just think it's very telling of the permission we give females to enjoy pleasure and enjoy sex. And then that obviously that is unhelpful for so many things, but for a condition like vaginismus, it makes it even worse because it is this psychosomatic vicious cycle of not enjoying something, which will make it harder to do. Yeah, and so a lot of my workshops, again, I've gone very tangential, but a lot of my workshops are trying to backtrack that and trying to allow space for women to accept that their pleasure is just as important as anyone else's, regardless of who they're dating, what their sexuality is, and then just exploring ways for them to do that, and talking about different things and encouraging them to get out of habits, I think, a lot, and think about, we talk a lot about anatomy and about how their anatomy works in terms of arousal and things like that, and then also about the science of orgasms and how we bring them on, how we can scare them off a bit, that kind of thing as well. So that's one workshop, but that's sort of the theme of all the workshops.
Quite talky. They're not like hands-on workshops by the sounds.
No, they're not. Do you know Betty Dodson?
I adore Betty Dodson.
She's incredible. But yeah, her workshops. For anyone who doesn't know, Betty Dodson, she is the godmother of orgasms. She was someone who would host classes like mine in her flat in New York, but everyone would be naked from the waist down and she'd be teaching them to masturbate. So hers are much, much braver than mine. No, I don't know why. So we couldn't host those workshops because the council hate us already. So we couldn't. And I'm not sure if we would if we could. I don't know if I would be up for that. It's hard to tell. And it's interesting as well, something that I think it's sort of like layers of people, really. Like people who come to the workshops at the shop. I think lots of them would be put off by there actually being practical masturbation work done.
Yeah.
So it brings more people, I think. And then again, with the Zoom thing, I actually think lots of people are coming to those Zoom classes who would never come into a sex shop. And those are the people that I'm really, really interested in getting and talking to as well. The people who are like, sort of, it's too scary just to come into a sex shop. So that feels really exciting about this new way of working. But we also have lots of other classes as well. That's just the one that we do most. We have like a spanking class, we have a bondage class, we have loads of other things. We also do a very similar class to Orgasmic, but it's just for men and it's about pleasure for women. And that is honestly, I mean, and it's a very, very heteronormative class, but it is honestly the class where I feel like I'm doing the most good.
And do you get a lot of people signing up for that?
That one we find a little bit trickier, but we started to get a bit of so we've only been running it for about a year and a bit. But when we did run it, we've had a few that were like sort of 10, maybe a little bit more. And it's just so fascinating. It's just so fascinating and so wonderful. And when it's just, we've tried it with men, and then we've tried it with men and their partners if they want. And it's always so fascinating that when it's just men, then it gets really exciting, because then they ask all of the questions that they wouldn't ask in front of their partner. Then they really delve into it. Like one of them, I just had the sweetest guy who was just sort of, I'd been talking for quite a while. I'd been like handing stuff out, and it's quite, in the shop it is quite interactive in the way that like we talk about a lot of toys, and like I hand out toys and stuff. I get them to make Play-Doh vulvas and stuff like that. And this guy just constantly throughout the class just kept putting his hand up and was like, "So when do I put my penis in?" Just like every 5 minutes, and then I was like, no, but like maybe never, maybe never. He was like, oh, like he wasn't disappointed by this. It was just a real revelation for him, and that feels really lovely when it is this kind of like completely changing their perspective on sex, and completely, and being really helpful as well, because I think it is a lot of pressure, because we've all grown up in this same bullshit society with the same things around us and the same rumors around us, and I think it's really unhelpful for straight men as well to think that like all of their power, or maybe all men, that like all of these orgasms must come from this penis, and that's all that can give the pleasure, and that's the main thing, because we put so much focus on stupid penises. But actually there's so much more to it, and I think when you talk to men about that, when you teach them all these different things they can do, it actually takes quite a lot of the pressure off as well. So it's not like any of them are like, nah, I'm not going to do this, I'm just going to go straight in. But they're actually, well, the ones that come to the class anyway, are actually really interested to hear about the other things that they can do. And it seems like quite a weight off their shoulders.
So it sounds like super pleasure focused, your teaching practice, which doesn't sound anything like the kind of sex education that I know I was given. But I'm interested, what was your sex education like, Evie?
Oh, terrible. I can't even really remember it. I get asked this question a lot because I'm a sex educator, and I can never really remember it. Really funny. I remember a science teacher once telling us that having sex was as you burn as many calories as having a run. And then I remember going home to tell my mum that, and her laughing and saying, well, she's having good sex. But I don't really remember about my sex education at all.
It's an amazing thing, isn't it, to tell young people, especially with like how much diet culture permeates everything, and then for the one comment about sex that it helps you burn calories and lose weight. It's like depressing. I know, absolutely. And not go into anything else. Nuts. Sorry, flow. Yeah.
No. I was going to say it was my sex workshops are very much pleasure focused, and they're not really any of the kind of like more worthy but incredibly important sort of like sexual health and contraception. That's certainly not my area of expertise. So it's much more about pleasure and permission to play, really.
And now, this.
Barbarella's. At the end of a long flog, two Barbarella's therapists take a well-earned break.
Phew. Long diurnal unit that.
Telling me, Contorta love. I just came off back-to-back stag parties from Kepler 26.
Come in, my friend. Those guys party like it's $49.99.99.
I just wish they wouldn't insist on real stags, you?
Oh, a couple of regulars from Ursa Major. Was all pretty relaxed until a last-minute poured up. A collective guilt squad from Penitencia 4.
Bugger.
Only to begin with. Then it was the old, oh, whoa, we have brought shame upon our sacred line. We must be punished for our many significant transgressions. Blah, blah, blah. Next minute, they're strapped to the wall, and my outer vibrissi is giving me death.
Have you tried Aurora Sodialis appendage solve? My sub swears by it.
I'll give it a try. Oh, well, better go cut them down.
They're still there?
Hell yes. They pay by the hour.
Tashi Delek, fellow voluptuaries. As you will no doubt be aware, we approach parthenogenetic space, and for the next 5 units must once again act out the fiction that we are simple physiotherapists and relationship counselors. And not the most orgiastic assemblage of love jockeys ever shot from their progenitor's ass. And it is my pleasure to lead you, Flably Domferani! So, for the next 5, all evidence of our true vocation will vanish. All VR is suspended. Displays of flesh are suspended. Suspension is suspended. All succubi put into cryosleep, and no one sucks so much as an ice cream. I don't want to see any leather that isn't a couch, or a single orifice that doesn't have words of encouragement coming out of it. Barbarella's has survived sexual bigotry before, and we will again. Alia ejecta est!
Will Barbarella's stonewall the pathos? Will the pathos enforce zoning bylaw X349K? Does Ursa Major shit in the woods? Tune in next temporal unit to find out.
Barbarella's, your enhanced physical and psychological alignment is our business.
And now to more weapons-grade content.
So tell me how that, like, personally, I can see how clowning might interact with that, but why is clowning an important part of the practice for that? I mean, do you bring your clown into your clowning into those particular workshops, or is that more in a different space?
I think there's something about just being a performer and knowing how to make people feel comfortable that's really important in those spaces. So I think generally I'm quite funny and light in those spaces, and I think that is definitely something that I've got from clowning and performing. So I think that is a really important part. I don't do much kind of clowning, as it were, in those workshops. That is more sort of for sex clown cabaret and my work outside that, really. And that is just about the importance, I think, to laugh about sex and to talk about sex in all these different ways. And again, the idea of sex clown cabaret is that it's just a cabaret show, but we're just talking a lot about sex. And it's sort of normalizing that conversation in a really funny way. And I just think humor is just the most useful thing in terms of sex, because it's so often sex is the furthest thing from sexy a lot of the time. In a good way. It's like, I feel like this picture we have of sexy is like, I don't know, it's all sleek and it's all like perfect and curvy or whatever it is. But sex is not that. Sex is gross and funny and weird and awkward and ridiculous and hilarious. And so I think humour is just a way to be really comfortable with sex in that way. And that was sort of the idea of Sex Clown Cabaret. Just to have these open. It's like full of games. We do loads of silly games like vulva moulding competitions, and we had like a Kama Sutra game where there's like a position held up and then everyone has to get in that position, but like in the most ridiculous ways with clothes on. Just loads and loads of silly stuff. And just to bring that conversation further and try and make more people listen. It's been, I've got to try and do some kind of digital sex clown cabaret, but I can't bring myself to do digital cabaret at the moment.
Yeah, I can imagine, and it's a hard thing to transform. I guess it's interesting too, to me, because I think that my understanding of clowning, without being a great clown myself, is that it's very much about being present and just exploring and playing, and there's not that sense of really needing to get to a goal, like you can just, clowning has that sort of timeless quality, doesn't it, where it can just sort of, you can watch someone just trying to sit on a chair for an hour and it's just the funniest thing you've ever seen, and there seems to me like a sort of relationship there, right? Because sex has been so goal focused for so long, and this is part of the problem, is we're all trying to like hit for orgasm, and the capitalist matrix trickles down, and everyone's working to efficiency, and so there's something really gorgeous about what you're talking about. I mean, do you see that relationship in the play and the exploration and the just being present? Is that something that bubbles up for you?
Definitely, and that is something that I talk a lot about, which is this sort of like target fixation on orgasms. And a lot of my advice to, whether you're on your own or in a couple or throuple or whatever it is, the usefulness of like a sex session that does not involve orgasms at all, and how just like exploring and it being absolutely, as you say, just about being present and this journey of pleasure rather than it being that end goal. And I think that's, you've hit the nail on the head, so connected to clowning. And also I think what interests me about the combination of like sex and clowning is the level of it that you're coming from, in terms of this kind of like idiot, this sort of like almost like a stupid sort of like idiotic way of looking at things, to me is so much, because I think there's something about certain parts of the sex positivity community that whether it's people like who are being sexperts or whether they're like, I don't know, super kinky, that it can be slightly exclusionary to people who are maybe like identify as much more sort of vanilla people, but maybe they want to explore a little bit, but they feel like it's not for them because they're not like pleather clad or like PVC clad or something. And that is absolutely nothing against that. That is a brilliant part of the sex community as well. But I think to kind of admit with sex that like, I've been learning this stuff for 4 years now, teaching for 4 years. I still get shit wrong. I still don't always know what I'm doing. Like, it's just the kind of admission of that. Like, I still I'm still sort of like teaching people how to communicate with their partner, and I still struggle to do it myself sometimes. I think it's that admission that no matter where you are on that kind of sexpert graph or scale, is what I'm looking for, we're still idiots when it comes to sex. All of us, I think. We're all sex idiots, I think.
It's so true, isn't it? Because we really aren't given permission to be beginners at any point. You know, I always felt myself that I was supposed to magically know what to do. This is the failure of sex communication worldwide, isn't it? That we're meant to magically know what to do, having only been shown a couple of pictures of chlamydia or something, and we're meant to know how to have sex with other people. And so you're never really given permission to be a bit of a dunce, you know?
Yeah.
It's a bit terrible. Like, it's so nice to just be like, I'm absolutely hopeless. Now can we start? That sounds very funny.
Yeah. And like that thing of, you know, this sort of like joke about people, like it's almost like it's integral to your personality to be good at sex. And I think and like what does that even mean? What does that even mean? It's also contextual as to who you're with, like what you'd anyway. But A, what does it even mean? But B, like we just wouldn't expect someone to be amazing at riding a bike if they had only ridden a bike, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times in their life, and no one had ever taught them how to do it. Yeah, so I think it's crazy that we expect the same of sex, that we expect like the people that we sleep with should be amazing at sex, should be good at sex, whatever it is. But we don't put the time in as a society in terms of education. That's not me saying that everyone you sleep with, you should be like, right, let's talk about this. Well, maybe you should. I don't know, take a textbook on your next
Yeah,
night.
I mean, if you had to define what you thought was good at sex, what would that mean in Evie's world?
I think it all comes down to communication. Good sex is communication. As this brilliant psychosexual therapist Kate Moyle said, communication is lubrication. I love that. But also lubrication, actual lubrication, is also very important.
Lubrication is also lubrication.
There's a wonderful book, actually there's 2 wonderful books. Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. I think I'm saying her name right. I can't remember. I'm very dyslexic and terrible with names, so I apologise if I've got that wrong. But it's a brilliant book. And then also Karen Gurney has just written a book called Mind the Gap. And both of those books kind of sum up this amazing, in different ways, they're great companions because they sum up sort of desire and creating good conditions for sex. And particularly Karen Gurney's book, it puts a focus on the fact that really no sex is that spontaneous, and we put so much pressure on ourselves to be having like amazing spontaneous sex like we were at the beginning of our relationship or whatever it is. But actually, like even at the beginning of the relationship, when you're going on that like first, second, third, fourth, whatever it is date, like you kind of decide that like before you go on the date, like maybe we'll have sex tonight, or and then if both of you have made that decision, then you have sex. But there is no spontaneity about it. Like both of you know what this is about, unless, I don't know, someone's saving themselves for marriage or something. But more often than not, like you know what that is about, and you know the what you want at least. And so I think if we put a lot less pressure on ourselves to have spontaneous sex, and we talked to the people we're having sex with, and we were planning, we planned it, I think, and we accepted that is also really fun to plan, and we can talk about it, and we can sext about it, and we can do all these other things around it, I think we would all have more amazing sex. And also masturbating. People masturbated a lot.
So good at sex is masturbating. Is there good at masturbating? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I think so. I think like exploring and stuff. I think it's just a really, if you want to have amazing sex with someone else, you have to know your own body, and you have to know how to pleasure yourself in, and I'd say in like lots of different ways as well, and explore your body and see how you respond to different stimuli, how you like, it's really easy to get yourself in one rhythm where you're like, yeah, so I'm going to use this thing and I know that it's going to make me come. Okay, brilliant, 5 minutes, let's go. But actually it's quite good to challenge yourself to go with a completely different thing. Like if it's your hand that normally works, try a toy, or vice versa. And then it's so much easier to teach a partner as well, or teach 5 people, whoever it is you're with.
How is your own sex life, Evie? Do you practice what you preach? Are you a masturbator explorer? Are you?
I like these hand gestures. Yeah, no, I do my homework. Well, I mean, at the moment it's weird because I am locked down with my parents at their house. But I have it's been very funny because I had to. So the day that London locked down, I grabbed a humongous suitcase at Shush of all of the toys that I'd need for classes and stuff. So I'm completely surrounded by sex toys and lubes and things. I've got this kind of weird little sex shop set up in my teenage bedroom, which is
Evie did just reach down and lift up this beautiful dilator just in the opportune moment. And I was like, wow, she's really prepared for this.
And that's just all here all the time now. And I'd like to say that none of these are my sex toys. They are the toys from Shush. They are the demonstration toys. Yeah, so definitely try and practice what I preach. What I think has been really interesting is I think I have certainly been feeling a really low libido in lockdown. And I've been chatting to lots of people, because I think the cultural narrative was oh my God, all of these couples that are locked down together are going to be having so much sex. But the statistics have been really interesting. They're almost everyone is reporting to be having less sex than they were having before lockdown, even though maybe they have a little bit more time now.
Because I'm sure there was a Guardian article right at the beginning of lockdown where New Zealand had higher sex toy sales in the day before lockdown. This huge rush on sex toys just before lockdown, and New Zealand was knocking it out of the park, and this sex shop wasn't even closing. They were considered an essential service because they sold condoms. So I guess people hadn't figured that out, but we'd beat out the UK, Australia, the US. So it's really interesting that people's libido.
That's amazing.
Because obviously their idea of what lockdown would be, as you say, was something perhaps quite different.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's been different for New Zealand, and maybe as well because you were locked down, but it hasn't been as bad in New Zealand. Maybe there's a level of anxiety that hasn't affected your sex drives as much. Maybe this is me massively sofa psychology.
Look, fair enough. I mean, I think I have no idea what it must be like to have the kind of statistics and deaths that are happening all around Europe and the US and in other places around the world. We are incredibly lucky to have a death toll of 26 people. It's just insane. So yeah, I think you might be onto something and say there might be a mental health disparity. Mind the gap.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, you guys have done so well. Yeah, I think it's been it's just been interesting, that kind of just noting that sort of thing, that I think sex drives have been a lot lower, but it was the same here. There was huge boom sales in sex toys, so it will be really interesting to kind of see the data afterwards, and see actually how often people have been using these sex toys. It'll be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a myth about having more time, I guess, is that suddenly our sex drive will just go up. I guess what I'm interested too in what some myths are around, you talked about there being a few barriers to people coming to this coming to your sex education classes, and that's changed a little bit because of the format. You've obviously had a kind of different crowd coming in. But what are some of the common myths that you encounter about the kind of work you do? Like, what do people assume when they hear that you're a sex educator?
That's an interesting question. We get a lot. So the technical name for Shush, so Shush was set up 28 years ago as Shush Women's Store. And because of this, we get a lot of phone calls, not me so much anymore because I don't work in the shop, but we get a lot of phone calls that are like, do you sell women? Do you sell women? No. Yeah, which is really, really disturbing. And so that is, I suppose, one assumption of what we do. And I think maybe there is a bit of assumption from some people that it's more of a sex work thing, which I have no problem with, but is sorry, what are you saying?
You describe it as sex work, what you do?
I describe it as sex education work. It doesn't, I'm not remotely bothered by it being sex work. I'm very pro sex work and sex workers. But I think my job is I'm not as skilled as most sex workers, I would say.
So I misrepresent what you're capable of. I love it.
I think a lot of people assume that it's either like that all sex education is talking about STIs and teaching people how to put condoms on bananas, or they assume it's like Betty Dodson, like everyone's naked and it's very hands-on. I think they're the big assumptions, I'd say.
And that's really interesting, because I guess I'm interested too in what you wish that you had learned as a young person in your sex education. I imagine it, you say you can't even remember it. So I guess anything anything would probably be good, right? But yeah, what do you wish, like, if you could just travel back to being, I don't know, 16 was when they started talking about sex to us. I don't know what it is in the UK. But if you could travel back to being 16-year-old Evie, like, what do you wish someone had said to you, what the health teacher had said to you?
That's such a good question. I think it would just be, and I don't know whether this should come from, I think it should come from a health teacher, but I wish it came from society at wide as well. I wish someone had said, like, sex is for you as well. Like, I had this ingrained belief that if you were a female-bodied person, that you didn't enjoy sex and sex wasn't for you, but it was like something eventually you'd let someone do to you. Like, it was kind of this thing that like men loved and like men had a sex drive, but females didn't actually, and they were just the pretty things that were pursued. So I definitely think I wish someone had told me that like pleasure is for you and sex is for you too. Yeah.
So in terms of because far out to come from there to doing the kind of work in the space that you're in right now, what feels like the biggest shift for you?
I suppose that, really. Yeah. That, and like knowing that I have empowerment over my own body and my own decisions when it comes to sex. And I think because I felt so like sex wasn't for me, like that thing that I've just said, that it was something that I'd let someone do to me, then I think that was something that got me into a lot of pain and trouble, because I didn't feel like I had the right to assert my boundaries. I let people do things to me that didn't feel right and weren't right. And that sounds like I'm victim blaming myself, and I'm not at all. I'm kind of like blaming society for teaching me that, or teaching lots of people that, because I just didn't feel like I had a right to assert my boundaries and claim my own pleasure. And so I do think that has been the biggest change, that I'm just fully aware and fully autonomous in my own pleasure. I know how to please myself, and I know how to please others, and I know when I want to do that. And I think that is just sort of the gift I want to fast track everyone into with the work that I do, just sort of like give them that empowerment and that knowledge that they are completely autonomous. They can give themselves their own pleasure. They don't need anyone else, but having other people is also great as well, as long as it is on your terms.
Ugh, preach. That's just fucking wonderful. Like, I am so, congratulations, you know, I am so fucking happy for you, because I think that's an amazing shift. And to hear somebody say that I claim my own pleasure and that I'm completely autonomous in what I want to happen to my body is really powerful, and it's really rare. And that's why the work you do is so important. I think you're cool.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. And I feel like I actually sort of want to talk about that more in my work, the kind of like where I've come from more, because I think it's really, I've sort of noticed that lots and lots of sex educators basically grew up in like super liberal households where their parents like had these really open conversations, and like, not that my parents weren't like, they weren't bad, they weren't sex negative really, it was just not really talked about. And so I think it's really important for like people that did come from a place of like feeling really, really sex negative, and that evolving. I feel like I want to hear from more people like that, where there's been a real journey.
That is so true. I know what you mean. That sort of I know that sort of archetype maybe in the sex community who just seems to ooze ease about this in a kind of genetic way, which may or may not be their story, but you're right. I think it's really important that we talk about not having everything right from the get-go.
Yeah. Which I should say as well is also brilliant. Like, that's also wonderful that they have had that upbringing, and they are bringing that to the world is also wonderful. I'm not saying that we should stop those people speaking. I'm just saying to like add to that conversation. I think people who, just those journeys of people getting to a place of sex positivity and empowerment, but maybe didn't start there, is also really interesting.
Oh man, this is such an amazing conversation. I wanted to jump back to something that twigged for me very early on in the conversation. It was about Louis C.K. And I was really interested in the way you were talking about it, because you're talking about the Me Too movement, but but I wondered what you thought about cancel culture and that kind of conversation about these male figures who have really deeply fallen from grace, and how we approach that. I'm interested in what you think about that, because you seem to have quite a gentle approach from the way you were talking about Louis C.K. and Harvey Weinstein. So yeah, what are your thoughts on cancel culture?
Oh, interesting. Gentle. Interesting. I think absolutely. What do I think? Sorry. I have lots of mixed feelings about cancel culture. I think that it is really important to listen to people, even if you struggle with things that they have done, or people that they have, or people that you disagree with. I think it's really important. I don't think I believe in any form of no platforming, but I also think it should be maybe a case by case thing. I don't know, something would come along that I really think shouldn't have a platform. But generally, I think I disagree with it. I think we have freedom of speech. We should be able to hear people out. But of course, that comes with exceptions in terms of really extreme things. I think with sexual assault particularly, and looking at these cases, looking at people like Harvey Weinstein and Louis C.K., I'm deeply, deeply angry, and I think that they should be cancelled. I certainly do not think that they should have power or a platform or a voice in the cultural conversation anymore, because they have destroyed people's lives they have destroyed people's lives for their momentary pleasure, and they have felt completely within their own rights to do that. And I feel incredibly angry for myself and for my own sort of story with it. Was like in some ways, a kind of a similar story. I think all of these stories have their similarities and differences. So I feel deeply angry at them, but also that anger holds a lot of fascination as well, and fascination of people's psychosexual imaginations and how these things manifest, and how these powerful men get to the point where they feel able and capable to perpetrate these crimes, and think that they're not going to get away with it, and get away with it for an incredibly long time because we hold up these powerful men. So I'm really quite fascinated by that. So I suppose it's incredible rage, but maybe sort of thoughtfulness in there as well, and kind of like just thinking about picking that apart. And I think that is something that we need to do in order to have these conversations about, so why do these things happen? Why do people feel the need to assault someone, or feel that they are able to take pleasure from someone who doesn't want to give it to them? Why do they still feel able? Why do they still want to do that? Really deeply, quite disturbing thoughts and a thing to pick apart, but I still think really necessary in the sex education conversation to pick apart, and that feels like it's giving them too much sympathy, and I honestly have no sympathy for these men. I feel so deeply angry at these men, and angry at the things they have done to people, but I still, and I think this is maybe from a dramaturgical point of view of creating a show as well, is that I am sort of fascinated in picking this apart and working out what the whys behind this, which I never ever want to come across as sympathy. I want, but it's a sort of maybe more, what's the word for like picking things apart? There's a medical word. It's gone. What did you say?
Dissection.
Maybe it's dissection. Maybe it's that. Yeah, that'll do.
Yeah, it's really interesting
Sorry.
because they are, I guess, yeah. It's certainly a curly question to encounter, and I can imagine it must be a challenging task to to put on a suit, even if it is covered in penises, and become Louis C.K. for a hot minute. There has to be in order to do the job well, whether it's comedy or not, there has to be a kind of test tube of empathy in there, doesn't there? And so it's the fundament, really, of understanding who that person is. So that runs counter to a lot of the rage, doesn't it? I would say that empathy is probably rage's antidote.
Yeah, and I think there's still and again I don't want to seem too sympathetic or empathetic with these men, because I'm not, but they are still in a small way a victim of the society that we have created in terms of the conversation around sex. They have been embroiled in that. They have been fed those things too. And so I think they are still part of the picture of how we untangle that. And that, I suppose, is a bit my mission of my sex education work, but also my theatre show. So I think that is where a lot of the thought for them has come from. And particularly, there's something I find doubly fascinating about Louis C.K., because I think for lots of people, he falls into a bit of a grey area. I think there is a lot of young men in particular who really love Louis C.K., who don't think he did anything that wrong, in inverted commas. And I've had so many young men come up to me quite angry at me for sort of satirising him and for trying to take Louis C.K. down, and sort of have big conversations with me about the fact that, like, you should do Harvey Weinstein, you shouldn't do him, and feel really upset and feel really kind of like, it kind of feels like they feel like they're being victimized, and I'm picking on them because they love Louis C.K. So I'm sort of quite fascinated by that grey, the grey area that they believe he sits in. I don't feel like Louis C.K. sits in a grey area. I think he is a perpetrator of sexual assault. But I'm interested in the fact that there is a cultural narrative of a grey area around him.
Yeah, there's a lot of charm. Hey, he leaves a lot of charm in his wake as well as trauma. So you're right. It's a really intoxicating mix and a confusing. Yeah.
Because I mean, who in the public narrative is going to be like, oh, but I loved Harvey Weinstein. He was so funny. He like, do you know what I mean? No one has that like deep love from enjoying his art. No one has that with him. So he's much easier to just for the whole world to be like, fuck you, you're awful. So I'm sort of fascinated how we all of us seem to have that duality, and I
really do hope that you do your sex clown cabaret online, because you probably won't do Louis C.K. That sounds like a whole solo show, but far out, man. I wish that I could be close to that penis suit in real life.
I'll send you one. I mean, they're very easy to make.
It's so genius, Evie. It's so genius. I wish I could see it in the flesh, and I just send out my lamentations to you for the hopefully momentary loss of live theatre, because I like you, I do believe it is really healing, and I think it's incredible. Evie, it's been such a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for giving me your precious morning.
Thank you so much. I've had a lovely time chatting, and I hope to meet you in the real world at some point.
Oh man, that would be amazing. Yeah, we'll let you know before the podcast comes out, and we'll let you hustle it as hard as you want to. But in the meantime, you have a beautiful day, Evie.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Wasn't it delicious? I hope you loved listening to the episode with Evie. And if you want to find Evie, you can go to www.eviefehilly.com. So their last name is spelled FEHILLY.com. That'll be in the show notes. But also their Twitter handle is @Evie Fehilly. And if you're interested in the work and the workshops that Shush does, I should work on my pronunciation, www.shhh, there's 3 H's in there, .co.uk /shop. And that's still doing some incredible workshops online and hopefully soon in person. Get amongst my friends.
Get amongst it. And while you're doing that, you could check out some of the other amazing interviews which we've got up live already, or are coming up in the next few episodes. Broad topics: Asians and sex, anti-shame, pornography, masculinity, ending HIV, and of course we'd also love to hear from you guys if you want to hook us up with any of that awesome criticism or feedback, any juicy ideas or topics that you think we should be talking about, or any particular individuals that you want us to chat to, then let us know. We're up for it. Send emails, pictures, voice recordings, or anything else you want to send us to hello@sexandspace.com. We would love to include them on upcoming episodes. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at sexandspace.com. That is Sex in Space, DOTCOM.
If you enjoyed this podcast and you have some spare swipes or clicks to go around, then leave us a 5-star rating or a lovely review on good old Apple Podcasts. That would be amazing. It really does help us so much. And we'll definitely be shouting out our reviews on future episodes. So keep those incredibly sexy. Always a huge thanks to all of our guests, the good folks at Zoom, for making this conversation with Evie possible.
Thank you, Zoom.
To the team at String Theory for all their support, and to Andrew, Tanya, Brandon, David and Richard for their amazing vocal work. Thank you as well to my amazing co-host Tim Blower. Could not do it without you. And that's true. And thank you all for making it all the way to the end with us. I hope to see you on future episodes, so join us next week. Bye my friends.
Bye bye.
If you found some of this material a little challenging, keep coming back, and we'll make it really challenging.